Welcome to an incredible journey with internationally renowned lawyer of attraction, Paula Kidd Casey. Applying the skills gained over 40 years of practicing law, Paula uses facts, logic, and science to prove the validity of the law of attraction. Join Paula each week as she explores unique concepts, allowing you to rediscover the wisdom of the ancient masters, all while weaving in the science that proves magic really does happen. If you yearn for a life change or want to rediscover your passion, then share the path with Paula and begin to love your journey every step of the way.
Hello, welcome to the Law of Attraction Radio Network, and I'm Paula Kidd Casey, and I am the host of the Lawyer of Attraction. And I am so pleased to have the next guest on my radio show. This is Tracy Farquhar. I have known Tracy for about 6 years. She is an internationally known professional psychic medium and channel. She's a psychic development instructor. She's a certified instructor for infinite possibilities, a motivational speaker, and the real exciting stuff is that she's author of 2 best-selling books. One is Frank Talk, and the other one she co-authored with Mike Dooley, which has now just been released on paperback, I think, and they've changed the name to Channeled Messages
from Deep Space
Club. Yes. Mm-hmm. And those of you that are familiar with Mike Dooley, I'm sure that you've heard of Tracy. He's had her on his program, and he's co-authored these things. But I want to give you just a little bit of background about my relationship with Tracy. I met her about 6 years ago. Now, the first time I met her, she was invisible. I mean, literally. I think when they say introvert in the dictionary, they say Tracy Farquhar, because literally, I don't remember her the first time that we were we both trained Infinite Possibilities. Now, I went in October of 2011, but I don't think you came until the next time. In 2012, is that right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And I don't remember her until the actual next time, because Tracy will tell you that she's an introvert, but her story on how she's come from so far from being an introvert to being an internationally known psychic and best-selling author is just amazing. And Tracy, we're so happy to have you here today, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's exciting.
It is exciting. It is exciting that what we're both doing, we both have platforms and we can both take our messages. And although we deliver our messages differently, I think our basic messages are the same. So I would love for you, Tracy, to give everybody a background of how you kind of have been on this journey, if you would.
Sure. Well, I got started on the journey about 13 years ago. I had just moved back to the United States from living in England for about 7 years, and I decided to take this night course in psychic development. It was something that I was always interested in. I had a friend who was taking the course. I thought it would be a good way for me to kind of get back into being home and settled, and I was excited about it, but I really didn't have too many expectations about it. But I found in taking that course, which I took over and over again, that not only was I kind of good at it, but I developed a real passion for that work. It became something that was really important to me. I created a little community. We all kind of studied together, practiced, and I knew that this was something that I wanted to pursue. So I started practicing on the side. I worked at that time in a college, so there were a lot of art students around me who were really interested in getting free readings, and that's how I practiced. And I started to become a professional and do readings on the side, and I had a full-time job for a while. And then that kind of shifted about 5 years ago, and I became full-time in my business.
That's wonderful.
So I started out just doing individual readings. That kind of shifted into also then doing group readings, doing mediumship readings, which is connecting with spirit. And then, as you mentioned, in 2012, I became a certified Infinite Possibilities trainer and started attending those conferences, which gave me an opportunity to speak, which was something I would have never guessed that I would have done. Because, as you said, I'm extremely introverted, really resisted the idea of speaking in front of groups at all. But was kind of nudged into it and found that I could do it. So Oh, along the path, there were times like that where something would appear, an opportunity would appear, and my default setting would immediately go into, no, I don't do that. But then
So
I
what
would,
made you take the next step?
well, I think it was just, having studied infinite possibilities and kind of understanding that when we set intentions, how things kind of show up on our path in response to those intentions, that they're not just random. When I would remind myself of that truth, I would kind of step back from the situation and reassess and say, wait a minute, if this is showing up, there must be something in it for me. So I would then kind of look into it and try it out. And I can't tell you how many doors opened because of that, because I would reassess when I would say no. I mean, I would say no at first, but then, I that's how I started doing distance readings for people, because I always said I wouldn't do that. It's how I started using tarot cards, because I always thought that would be too difficult. And of course, that's how I started doing the channeling, because that was something that I thought was way beyond my capabilities and way too strange for, even me.
Well, so, I want my readers to know that when they're fearful of something, but that, that there's something inside of them that's calling them to do something, that they can do that, right? That they can take that leap of faith.
Yeah, I think it's important to realize that, we have a built-in fear factor that in our ego will jump in and want to protect us, and it has a job to do, and that's what it's supposed to do. But it will jump in at times where it's not really necessary, and that's when we really have to connect with the heart center and really go into the feeling place and ask ourselves, how does this really feel, rather than what am I really thinking about it? Because it's the thinking mind that goes into the fear place.
Right.
The heart is the feeling place is going to be where you really feel that intuitive pull towards something.
And do you do that by quieting your mind, so your mind quits talking to you? And then how do you focus on that heart feeling space to make sure that intuition is really speaking to you?
Yeah, I think it's creating more of a balance between the heart and the head. Instead of just thinking you have to overcome the head, I mean, we need that thinking mind, we need logic, we need to have, all of the logical concerns about being human. But it's, again, asking yourself more frequently, how does this feel? Because normally we go right into the thinking place. What is the logical choice? What are the pros and cons? What am I thinking about this? What are other people telling me? And all of that is valuable, but if we're leaning all of our decision-making intentions in what we're thinking, we're missing out on what the real feeling place is telling us. And again, that's where our intuition is. That's where our higher self speaks to us. That's where our spirit guides speak to us. And that is going to help you to feel more confident about making choices, so that it's not just what you're thinking and not just what looks good on paper, but it's also what you feel is going to be in your highest good.
Well, Greg Braden, one of my favorite authors, he calls it coherence,
Yes.
where you actually connect the brain with the heart. One way you can do that is kind of put your hand over your heart and put intention to your heart. Because I think a lot of us are kind of afraid to even go there. So, I think your story is such a great example for a lot of people. So I noticed on your website that you said your sisters have always been, or your family has always been kind of had psychic abilities. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, I grew up in a household that was pretty open about that kind of stuff. My older sister, well, I all my sisters are older, but my one older sister actually does readings, and she's out in Sedona, Arizona. And so she was always doing something in that realm when I was growing up. Most of it I didn't understand at that time. Most of it seemed way too far out for me. But it also became just kind of part of my knowing, if you know what I mean. It was just part of life, and so it didn't really scare me. It wasn't something that was that unusual. We had a lot of kind of paranormal experiences in different houses we lived in, and so it was always part of my awareness. I didn't have a really strong religious background, and so I think that helped because I was already kind of open to those possibilities.
So you didn't have defenses or preconceived notions that this was, a negative thing.
Not
You were
too
open
much.
to everything.
No. I had, I think the biggest blockage that we can have to our psychic and intuitive abilities, and we all have them, we all have those abilities, and we all have the blockages that limit what we believe we can do. And so this is where Infinite Possibilities kind of intersects with what I do and how I teach, because it's not that I teach people how to be psychic or intuitive. I'm helping them to overcome the limiting beliefs that they have to their own abilities. And that's
great. Yeah.
And that's, we're so conditioned, even in the background that I had, our culture just conditions us to be very skeptical about anything that we can't prove, and there's wisdom in that, but there's also experiences that go beyond scientific proof. There are experiences that we just know are real and genuine. And so, it comes down to really trusting yourself and believing yourself and having confidence in the things that you get that are beyond the thinking mind. And that's not always easy to do, but it certainly is possible. And when you're able to do that, it's not just about doing readings for people. It's about having confidence in your decision making.
So that's one of the things that gave you more confidence, was getting in tune with your intuition and your psychic ability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It just helped me to feel more in tune with myself, feel more comfortable with myself, understanding that I was more than just this physical body, which in itself is an amazing thing. But understanding that I was more than that there's an energetic essence to me, and that energetic essence can connect with other energetic essences in the universe. And just knowing that makes the little things that tend to irritate us in our daily lives a little less important.
Well, and I think it's important that you bring up science, because people really can poo-poo this, because although I do think there's science out there, I don't think it's necessarily been published. But, Lynn McTaggart says science is just a story told in installments. Mm-hmm. So we're not to that installment yet, right, that is going to be able to prove that this is real. But I've been at one of your spirit galleries. Is that what you call it? I've been at more than one. But when we were at Rebecca's house, so I know Tracy, but Tracy doesn't necessarily know that much about my family. I mean, we don't talk about a lot of specifics. We've been to a lot of these things together, and we talk the big pictures and how we're going to change the world and that kind of stuff. But she did we're sitting around, and it's lightning and it's thundering. We have candles on, and I was not afraid at all. It was a very kind, loving feeling. And so when she channels, you're not necessarily knowing who's talking to you, right? Somebody's there and explaining something to you when you've got a spirit gallery going on. Is that right?
The spirit gallery, I don't really think of that as channeling. Channeling's a little bit different, but to me, that's what mediumship is. Mediumship, connecting with spirit. And so, yeah, in a gallery type situation, I just kind of tune into whoever shows up, and just convey the information that I get. And usually I'll get some kind of identifying information about the spirit, so someone can say, well, that sounds like my grandmother or my aunt or whatever.
Right.
And then, we can identify who it is and then convey any messages that come through.
Well, when we were at this one spirit gallery, my dad, who'd been dead about, 7 years, showed up. And he was very persistent. You probably don't remember this. And he was very persistent in life, and he was very persistent on the other side of life. Mm-hmm. And Tracy was telling me a whole bunch of things about my son that were so true. And I mean, there's no way she would have known these things. And they were coming from my father through her. And I got to tell you, I'm an attorney. So, I kind of entered into this whole thing pretty as a skeptic, but I'm amazed. I'm amazed at some of the stuff Tracy has said. And you can work with people from all over the world, right? You live in New Jersey, but you don't have to just work with people from New Jersey, right?
No, most of the work that I do is online. And yeah, I've done readings for people all over the world, everywhere.
So that's amazing. At the end, we're going to give them some more information on how that they can contact you. But I want to talk about Frank. And Frank is a collection of, they're not spirits, right? They're entities from, I'm going to let you tell everybody what they are. I'll get it right and I won't mess it up. So
Great.
tell them how you met Frank and how how you came up with all that.
Yeah, well, there was an incident many years ago. I can't even remember how many years ago it is now. It's probably about 10, maybe a little less, where my sister, who is the practicing psychic, was visiting me, and we had a few incidents that happened in the house that made us think that something was trying to connect with us. We have enough experience with that kind of thing to feel that, that something was trying to contact us that wasn't physical. So, our first response was to get out the Ouija board. Well, we didn't have a Ouija board. And, that's what my sister used to use all the time when I was growing up, and it was just a tool to communicate with the other side. So we went in the basement, got some cardboard, and made a Ouija board. And
well, there you go.
There we go. It worked. We sat down, and after a few minutes, it started to spell out Frank. And neither of us knows anyone with that name. Didn't mean anything to either of us. We didn't know what this was. But just from the brief communication we had, they wanted to connect through me through automatic writing, which I had never done before. I didn't know anything about, but I decided to try it. And that evening I sat down with pen and paper, and I started to get words. I really had no idea what it was going to feel like to do that, but it was very similar to my life as a secretary, because I spent most of my life as a secretary taking dictation from somebody.
Oh, uh-huh.
So it would be a word and then another word. And so it was clearly not a thought that I had in my head that I was, thinking about putting into words. It was just words. And they didn't really make a whole lot of sense until I looked at what I had written and read it back, and it made sense. So, I went with this for a while. The information was really amazing and beautiful and helpful and felt really good. But I didn't really know what to do with it at that time. So I put it aside for a few years, and then I kind of felt that nudge again to pick it up again. And then I got some more information. So what they told me about themselves was that there was a group of 8 beings, that they were from another place in the universe. I think it's 8 billion light years away. Whoa. So they're on another planet. And that they are alive and well and living their lives on their planet, but that they had found a way to project a part of their consciousness to connect with me, and through me to connect with whoever wants to listen. So, it was pretty mind-blowing stuff that even I had a hard time really grasping and understanding. And I still have my moments of, just being in awe and wonder about it. But it always felt so positive and always felt so good that, I never had any doubt that there were anything less than really positive intentions behind this connection. So when I started communicating with them again, the second time, they started dictating the book. And so that was the first book, Frank Talk, which I self-published. And since at that time I was an Infinite Possibilities trainer, I made sure to give a copy to Mike Dooley. I really had no thought that he would read it. He would always say he doesn't read much, and people give him books all the time. But I thought he might be interested because I knew that he had been interested in the Seth books, Jane Roberts, right. Uh-huh. Channeled Seth. And so I thought he might be interested. And it turned out he did read it. He started messaging me a few months later and told me how he thought the book was wonderful. And we talked, and we decided to do a webinar together. So we did a live channeled session with Mike asking questions. We had done a lot of preparation for that by meeting online like this through Zoom. And I would channel Frank, and he would ask questions, and we got some really amazing stuff. So we did this webinar, and we loved doing it so much that then we decided to write a book together using that same kind of question and answer format. So
how did that take you to write the book?
The actual question and answer was probably about 6 months or so, uh-huh. Maybe a little more than that. And then the whole process of, editing and, putting it in a cohesive order took a little bit longer. So that was published last May of 2017. And it was called From Deep Space with Love as the hardback. And then, as you mentioned, the paperback just came out in September. Hay House wanted the the title to be a little clearer about what it was.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So we changed the title to Channeled Messages from Deep Space.
And that's done well, hasn't it? That's like on the bestseller list.
It was when it first came out. And yeah, it's done pretty well. Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you a couple questions. One, do you know why Frank chose you and how they found Earth? And I mean, do they tell you that, or did you ask, or?
Well, in some of the question and answers in the books, they talk about how this wasn't the only planet that they visited, that they've kind of made it their mission to help other beings in other places with the wisdom and experience that they gained from their own experiences on their planet. So they were on the brink of destruction. That's the story that they've told. And it took a real shift in consciousness for them to be able to recover from that. So within that shift of consciousness came a sense of wanting to help others to experience that same kind of shift. And so it feels to me that they kind of seek out civilizations that would be open to that kind of guidance. And it seems as though the Earth is in the midst of this kind of shift of consciousness already, which is, a lot of spiritual teachers have been talking about for a long time. So that's not anything new. But, they just, I think, connect with those of us like me who are open to receive their messages and whose intention kind of matches theirs.
So there could be other people here on our Earth receiving these same messages, right?
Yeah, I think there are, yeah.
Okay. So do you know what they're telling you? Because I know I took notes once. That I think that was more the mediumship, but that do you understand what they're saying when they're talking through you, or do you have to go back and listen afterwards, or is that you and them melting and you're helping them with words? How does that work?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting process. So when I do the verbal channeling, it's different from when I do the writing. Okay, so there's still, in both cases, there's a sense of my personality and my energetic essence kind of shifting to the side. I'm not what's known as a trance channel. So there are people who are trance channels who kind of leave the building, so they go into a trance state where they're really not aware of what's happening. For me, it's more like I'm moved to the side a little bit. I'm still conscious. I'm still present. I'm kind of in an observer mode. But, I could step back at any time and end it. There's not a sense of me being out of the picture, out of control. And I think that's probably by design because I feel comfortable in that way, and as I've been working with that, it's become more and more comfortable. So at the time that it's happening, I'm aware of what's being said. And what Frank has explained, somebody once asked in a live session that I did if Frank speaks other languages other than English. And they said, we don't speak English. We're speaking through frequency.
And you're translating it.
Right.
Yes.
So the frequency is coming in and kind of being automatically translated by the way my brain is programmed. And so this is like a computer program up here.
Sure.
It's processing information all the time as we go about our day, depending on how we program it. And so, one of the aspects of infinite possibilities is how we program our brain with beliefs, right?
Right.
So my brain is programmed to English because that's the only language I speak. And so that's the way it comes out. So whatever comes out is going to be limited to my vocabulary, my language. And what I really believe also is that it's going to have to resonate with my truth.
That's what I was going to ask you. Have they ever said anything that you would not have gone along with what you thought was the truth?
They have expanded on things that I have felt. They've kind of shown me a bigger picture, but there's never been anything that has had that feeling of not being resonant with my truth. And I actually really believe that I wouldn't be able to speak it. I wouldn't let that come through because I have an intention to only ever connect with what feels like higher energy, what feels like inspirational, motivational, uplifting information.
So did they, when they edited your book, did they edit anything that you didn't want them to edit, or did they just clean up?
No, it actually, you mean Hay House, right?
Yeah, I mean whoever's editing. Not Frank, Hay House.
Yeah, I was a little concerned about that when we wrote the book, because it's a totally different feeling when, I'm not really the author.
Right.
So, I was a little nervous about how much was going to be edited. And actually, it was very, very little. And in fact, the editor exclaimed how, it was, they had to do so little work on it.
Well, that's because it was inspired. I mean, how could an editor change this consciousness from 8 billion miles away? I mean, really, think about that. So I've read both of your books. They're amazing. I would encourage everyone to get the books. But you talked about a shift in consciousness. Can you give us an overview of kind of what they're teaching us as far as what we need to be doing to shift our consciousness in this time?
Yeah, it feels to me like, everything that they say is that we're all here at this moment to experience and be part of the shift that's already occurring. So this began a while back. We're right in the middle of it. We chose to be here at this time, and that we each have our own role there. So there will be some who will be the resistors, and they have a role. There are some who are just the observers, and they play a part. And then there are those who are, the people who are really instigating change, who are standing up in their truth, who are speaking out, who are teaching. So everybody has their own place here. So what Frank encourages is, again, when we, as we talked about, a connection with what we feel is in our highest good. The highest expression of who we are is the way that we're participating in that shift. So if you feel motivated to speak out for something that you believe in, or against something that is not resonating with your truth, then that might be your role, is to be a speaker or a writer, or someone who stands up and voices that. And then there are some who are more just quieter in their influence, who are the meditators and the people who are holding spiritual space. And so I think we're in a very challenging time when we look at the news and we look at what's going on in the world, and it can be very upsetting to those of us who are sensitive to the energy. There's a lot of dissension and division going on, but what Frank keeps reminding us is that all of that is leading us to a higher state of consciousness, that we are now more deliberately creating that higher state, and that it doesn't even have to be the majority that goes along with that, because that energy is so much more powerful than the energy of something that is not in line with compassionate care and humanity. So it's just, again, it's connecting with our heart, asking what's in our highest good, asking what our gifts and talents are, and what is the best way for us to express them in the world. That's what you're here to do.
So, one of the things we teach is that you have to have contrast, because you have to know what you don't want, so that you can really get clear what you do want. One of the things I teach is that you need to put all your attention on what you do want, because I think if you push against what you don't want, that just kind of gives it some kind of an energy. So are they saying that we need to define what we do want and put all of our energy into that?
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the things that I love that they talk about is, there are a lot of people who are rising up now and speaking out and speaking their truth. And again, just what you're saying, speaking for what they want to see more of. And Frank calls that uprising evidence of the raising of consciousness. So we're rising up because we're raising our vibration. We're raising the frequency of our consciousness. And this is what it takes. Sometimes we need to be motivated to change by witnessing and experiencing what we don't want. So that's the contrast. Sometimes that's the only thing that kind of pushes us into the spotlight, where we're a little bit more conscious, a little bit more aware, and using our voice in a little bit bigger way. And we don't like change, we humans. You can think about it in your own personal life. We'll hold on to something just because it feels stable, even when we know it's not in our highest good.
Mm-hmm.
So when you apply that to the bigger picture here, it takes a lot for us to be pushed into allowing change and participating in it. So that's what's happening. We're being pushed to the degree where we're like, okay, we're ready now to create, not only just go along with, but create this change.
So one of the things you said is that we don't need everybody in the world to go along with this. And there's a theory that there's a tipping point, that it only takes 2 to 3% of the population to get a critical mass. There's a lot of science behind that. There's that 100th monkey story where once the monkeys start thinking a certain way and washing off their sweet potatoes in the ocean, that all the other monkeys on all the other islands immediately start doing it, because there's this collective consciousness. So it doesn't take everybody to do it. But the thing that hit me, a couple weeks ago, is that that also goes along with fear. If there's that much fear, it can also tip it in a way that we may not want it tipped. So, one of the things you teach is it's the highest good. It's finding the solutions. It's finding the love in everything. Isn't that right?
Yeah. And sometimes it's the fear that motivates us to that again.
Absolutely. Because it shows us what we don't want.
Exactly.
But I think if we get out of the fear and into the love of what we want,
right.
I'm hoping that's what the tipping point gets to, and it will get us to the next level. So what does Frank see? What do you see? And what does Frank see through your eyes? I get so confused with pronouns. As far as what this shift is going to look like, what are we going to end up at the end when we get through the positive, consciousness of this shift?
Well, one thing to remember is, even as a psychic medium and Frank as this kind of, energetic collective, we can't predict the future. I don't think anybody can really do that. We can sometimes tune into, possibilities that turn out to be correct. And so, if a psychic predicts something, I feel it's just because they're tuning into a possibility that happens to emerge.
I like that.
And so, with an intention to be inspiring and uplifting and helpful, it is not in any way helpful to say this is what's going to happen, because that implies that there is some inescapable fate that we all have.
Right.
And so how does, doesn't motivate us to participate in creating the future. Future is always changing depending on our choices, and that's our greatest gift, is our free will. So the possibilities that Frank sees and that I feel are that, we can start to come into a greater sense of awareness of ourselves as energetic beings. We can begin to honor ourselves in a way that connects with that heart center that we started out talking about. To me, this is the divine feminine energy, the heart-centered energy. It's where our intuition is, it's where our feeling place is, our emotional place, and it's something that, our culture has dishonored for a long time in favor of the more masculine energy, which is the thinking logical brain, which is also divine and important, but limited. And so when we talk about masculine and feminine energy, it's nothing to do with gender. It has to do with different nature of energy, and where we have dishonored is really what needs to now rise up, and become more honored and become more important and trusted and honored in just the way we live our lives, because it will lead us into a greater sense of loving compassion and more of a feeling place, rather than always going into thinking and logic, which tends to put us into some traps of thinking,
Because we can only think about what we know about,
Exactly.
It's hard to jump to the next level. I just read this quote by Einstein, and there's no such thing as coincidences, but, he says, the rational mind is supposed to be the servant, and the intuitive mind is supposed to be the master. And we live in a society where they, got that reverse. Our rational mind is now the master, and we don't even acknowledge the intuitive mind. And this is probably the smartest man, that's lived in the however long. So I think that's amazing that he also said that, you know, our rational mind is there for a reason, but we also need to be tuning into our intuitive mind. Well, so tell me what their consciousness shift looked like on their planet.
Well, it's, you know, it's kind of like what they're encouraging for us. It was a shift toward exploring areas that their scientific community would normally not touch, you know. And when you think about that, in our culture, there are, you know, things in the spiritual nature of being that the scientific community doesn't explore because it's just not something that can be, at this point, scientifically proven with the scientific method. There has been exploration, there have been experiments, but they're always discounted because they don't meet the standards of a scientific investigation. And so they're, you know, they had to kind of be the advocates for doing more exploration in the field of consciousness and spirituality and energy and intuition and the nature of, you know, of reality in the sense of the multidimensional being, which was something that, you know, that they had only scratched the surface of at that point. And it's the same kind of thing here. You know, there are some aspects of quantum physics that explore those, you know, those things, and we're just starting to see where some of these things are becoming more prevalent in that kind of experimentation. But that's what really started to expand their awareness and allow them to see other solutions to some of the problems they had that weren't just based on, you know, a monetary system. So they totally abolished a monetary system and came up with different systems of exchange, which opened up incredible avenues for exploration and experimentation and, you know, personal expression that weren't based on how much money you had, you know. And that's what led them to be able to experiment with this kind of consciousness projection, which is the way that they can connect with me.
So one thing I see is that I think science is catching up with spirituality, because there's a lot of teachers out there that are bridging the gap between science and spirituality. And I think as a culture, especially in our Western culture, we've been kind of taught not to pay attention to our spirit because somehow it's correlated with religion. You know, we can't have religion in schools. And if you're not brought up in a religious family, you're not really exposed to this kind of the portion of yourself that's so important, our spirituality. So they're saying that's something that we're all going to start recognizing more, and we should be more. And
we have an opportunity to do that now, is what they're saying. And so, you know, if we are feeling pulled to do that this is something that is important to do. You know, they're never going to tell us that what we should do. They're suggesting things to us that worked for them, which is pretty much how I teach too. You know, I can tell people my story. I can tell them what worked for me when I was exploring that level of consciousness, but everybody has their own journey and everybody has their own choices to make. So there's never any sense of them dictating to us what we're supposed to be doing in order to survive this. They're saying, look, you're having an opportunity here. This is an amazing opportunity for you to really expand what you believe is possible and you know, expand your consciousness and allow different methods in than you might have even considered possible before. You know, methods of, you know, scientific exploration, medical exploration, consciousness exploration, you know, these things that, you know, we put limits on just because we're looking at it from a cerebral intellectual sense, where when we start to look at it from a spiritual sense, there are no limits.
So speaking of no limits, you've gone after your dreams, and you have two amazing children that have gone after their dreams, and you've been a wonderful role model. Nice. Can you share a little bit about how they've gone after their dreams?
Yeah, well, you know, the other thing that shifted hugely for me in, you know, just exploring this part of myself and going through the infinite possibilities training and teaching it was the way I parented. You know, it really changed how I saw my role as a mother. And I started to realize that I told my kids, I'm just a tour guide. You know?
I like that.
I'm here to show you around, to show you what's available to you, to, give you suggestions, to show you what's worked for me again, and show you what's possible. And seeing them as whole and complete individual people, and it really always encouraging them to express that individuality in their lives. Sometimes that was difficult for them, growing up and going through, middle school and all of those times in your life where you're so pressured to be like everybody else,
Mm-hmm.
But now they are completely, independent in thinking, in knowing themselves. And so my older daughter, Gemma, is 20. She is now in California exploring a life out there. She decided not to go to college. She wanted to see if she could, what she could make of her life out there. She is a performer and a singer and an actress and a model. And so she's looking for her place out there. She's having a lot of fun, and she's learning just as much, I believe, in that life as she would in college right now. She hasn't closed the door to that. That might, appear one day, but that's where she is.
But she went out there all by herself.
You did, yes.
You model. I mean, so proud of her. I'm sure you are.
Yeah, she's doing great,
I've seen pictures. Again, she's gorgeous.
Thank you. Again, it's just me holding the space, and sometimes that's very difficult as a parent. We want to catch them. We want to, we want to mold. We think that we're molding them and really, directing them. But that's, I had to kind of really back off from that role. And it's been really, really amazing. So my other child is Ollie, and he is now 18. And he is a transgender male. So Ollie was born Kate, female, and has gone through a year of medical transformation to be a male. Is very open about his gender identity, and in fact speaks about it, is incredibly wise and open-hearted and loving, and he
does look wise. He does look wise. How did you say that? He looks like an owl, and you love owls.
He's always been that way. Even when he was little, he would come out with just one sentence that would just kind of sum everything up that everybody was talking about, and I would say, where did that come from? So he's been one of my greatest teachers. Both of them have. And I'm incredibly proud of, this very difficult journey that he's been on, and how he's managed it with grace and kindness and compassion. And it just inspires me and has taught me, and again, expanded my thinking and my belief system in amazing ways. And I know that he's going to continue to do that the rest of his life for other people.
And one of the things that you opening yourself to other possibilities was, you obviously realized how important that was to allow them to open themselves up to other possibilities. Because I think there's a lot of parents out there that this would be a great lesson for them to learn. And you and he have done some interviewing on some programs about his journey, haven't you?
We did an interview on Princeton TV, the program called Positive Energy with Michelle Gramberg. And she has said that was one of her best favorite shows, her best shows, just because Oliver is so wise and so fluent in his explanations. And, it really was, I had to hold back the tears quite a few times just with the way that he spoke about himself and his journey. It was really a beautiful thing.
And he is in college now, right?
He's in college. He just started at Rowan University with the intention of becoming a therapist for the LGBTQ community. Yes.
Oh, that's wonderful. So what do you think the hardest part of your journey from invisible introvert that I didn't even know was there to this amazing international best-selling author medium? What was the hardest part of that journey?
Yeah, I think it's just, the putting myself in the spotlight is still very difficult. I'm still an introvert. I'm just working with it differently. I still need the alone time, and I have a lot of it now that my kids are both out of the house. And I still need to be very cognizant of my energy and where my energy levels are, and not to, do too much in one day, because it can be very draining. And, I find the most difficult part of my business is the marketing and, putting myself out there and advertising myself. And, I rather just people found me, but,
I actually found you.
Right, exactly. Just be drawn to me and find me, and here I am. But, I do have to be present on social media and, put myself out there. And that can be pretty draining and hard for an introvert to do. So yeah, there's been a lot of challenges. There have been times where, I have just felt like I wanted a more normal life, normal in the sense of being more predictable, more stable, more secure, steady income and benefits and all the stuff that I used to have as a secretary. But then, I know that it wasn't nearly as fulfilling. It wasn't nearly as uplifting. And it really, that had its place in my life. And right now I feel like my place is somewhere different. So I just have to keep inspiring myself to keep going.
So talk about them getting a hold of you. Can you tell them some of the services that you offer and how to get a hold of you?
Sure. So I offer individual readings. I offer a psychic reading, which is a connection with your energy with the intention to give you some guidance on your life path. I offer a spirit guide reading, which can help you connect with your spirit guides, give you some information about the guide, and give you some direct guidance from the guide. And then I offer mediumship reading, which is a connection with your loved ones in spirit. So that would just be conveying messages. So all of those can be done on an individual basis. And then I offer group readings, which are the spirit galleries, like you mentioned, which I can do in person and online.
You can do those online. So people can have a party at their house and get you on a Zoom call and you can feel the spirits. I take it they're non-local. I take it
yeah.
You can feel them wherever. So
yeah, well, yeah, energy isn't contained by time and space, and so that was something I had to learn when I started doing distance readings. It's all in the intention, and so energy is limitless. So yeah, I can.
How much fun that would be to have a party, have a party and invite Tracy.
Right.
And see who else shows up.
Right, exactly.
What other spirits might show up? How much fun?
So I also offer a coaching, so psychic development coaching, infinite possibilities coaching, spiritual coaching, and then I have a lot of online workshops and classes periodically that are all listed on my website. So my website is just tracyfarquhar.com. That's how you can find me. Everything is listed on there, and you can even book an appointment right on my website.
And you also have a Facebook page, and I'm assuming they can follow you on that, and it's
That's
still
right,
Tracy Farquhar?
Yep, so I have a personal page, which is just my name, and then my business page is Tracy Farquhar Psychic Medium.
Okay, and one of the things I always thought was interesting is that you can actually teach people, maybe not to become full-time psychics, but to actually plug into their own psychic ability. That's one of the classes you teach, right?
Yeah, so I teach infinite possibilities right now. I'm teaching it at a local community college night class, which is really interesting because that's the same class that I got started in that I mentioned earlier. So I'm now teaching there at the same place.
How much fun?
So it's come full circle. And again, it's just, I give a lot of suggestions for experiments and things that people can practice just to expand their belief system and show them what they can do and increase their confidence. And, we meditate, we talk about a lot of other kind of metaphysical subjects. I have guest speakers come in. And so I also offer a version of that class online. It's a little bit more limited because we're not in person. There are some things we can't really do, but it's still, really valuable information. So I have that going on. That's starting next week if anybody's interested in that. And then, of course, I teach infinite possibilities. I have a class in that running at a night school right now, too.
Well, you're busy. You're busy.
Yes.
What's the one thing that you would tell somebody that wanted to go after their dream, but was a lot like you, that was an introvert and that was afraid to take it to the next level? Is there one piece of advice you'd like to give them?
I think, if you're feeling called to something, if something feels good to you, if it feels like it is calling to your heart and soul, if it makes you happy, if it expands your sense of joy, if it just, when you do something, it just makes you feel connected and engaged in your life, then that's something that you need to pay attention to. And when fear comes up, understand that that's not necessarily the truth. Again, it is part of your thinking brain that just wants to keep you safe, but it goes way beyond what it needs to. For the most part, your ego voice will come up with lies. It will come up with fears that aren't founded. And so again, it's important to check in and say, yeah, but what is it? What do I really feel? And what if I can do this? What if this is the best thing I've ever done? Normally we go into fear by saying, what if I fail?
Mm-hmm.
What if I make a mistake? What if this isn't right for me? Well, if you're going to fantasize about the future, let's fantasize about it in a way that creates a possibility that it's the best thing you've ever done.
What if it does work?
Mm-hmm. What
Great
if it is
your imagination?
What if it's one of the things you came here to do? How will you know unless you try it, until you start to step on that path? And again, open every door. That doesn't mean you need to step through it. It doesn't mean that you can't redirect if something doesn't work out. But, look at every opportunity. Don't be so quick to shut things down when they show up. Because if you have an intention, and, that's your starting point, is to have an intention. That intention can be how you want to feel rather than the thing that you want. But when you set that intention, the universe is going to put things in your path to help guide you. So, if you're just shoving them aside because you have a belief system that says you can't do it, you might be missing something really valuable. So open yourself up to the adventure. Let's be curious. Let's be open. Let's have fun. Let's look at all the challenges as methods of helping us to get where we want to be, even the things that we don't like.
And one of the metaphors that Mike Dooley always does is the GPS system.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to take the next step.
Mm-hmm.
Put your intention in. You got to put your car into gear. You got to take that first step. But then the universe is going to show you the next one and the next one. Because, I think that we're all overwhelmed to go from where you were 7-8 years ago to where you are now. But it was just one step at a time, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And it continues to be.
And you've done such a wonderful job. Well, Tracy, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you being on my show. You've been a pleasure. I would encourage everyone to go to Amazon and buy her book, her books, both of her books, but the new one out, the paperback, is Channeled Messages from Deep Space with Love. Is that correct?
Channeled Messages from Deep Space, yes.
From Deep
Wisdom for a Changing World is the subtitle.
Okay. Well, it's wonderful. I've read it. It's amazing. And it'll make you think. It'll make you get outside that comfort zone sometimes, but it really helps us see that there's a much bigger picture and there's so much optimism out there, which is what we need in this world right now, right?
Absolutely.
We need optimism.
Yes.
So thank you, Tracy. I appreciate that. And I will be right back with the rest of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So now we're back, and I want to thank you for joining us with this hour with Tracy Farquhar, who's the internationally renowned psychic. And she's got her new best-selling book out, Channeled Messages from Deep Space. I'd like to leave you with one of the quotes from one of the blogs that she wrote on her website, because I think it's very appropriate for what we talked about today. From being an introvert and being afraid to take a life to the next level and taking that one step at a time. So she says, energy flows in cycles, both within us and around us. And if we resist a cycle, we are thrown off our natural rhythm and can begin to feel an imbalance. When we desperately cling to the things that no longer serve us, we can find that our energy starts to feel sucked and we feel a loss of sense of motivation and drive. If we resist change out of fear of the unknown, we limit our opportunities for growth and expansion, and we may begin to feel resentful and drained. If the energy that we expend is greater than the energy we allow ourselves to receive, we will eventually become depleted. When we diminish the importance of our own needs, we are less motivated towards self-expression and self-growth. When we ignore the small, still voice inside of us that is constantly urging us forward, we will feel empty and purposeless, since the cycle of growth and expansion is our natural state of being. She goes on to say, nourishing the sacred self cannot be an occasional thing. There needs to be a consistent message sent to that self that says, you are worthy of feeling good. You deserve care and consideration. Your needs and desires and emotions matter. You have a right to go after your dream. It's a divine destiny to go after your dream. And there are so many tools and people out there that can help you take that life to the next level. So once again, I thank you for joining me today, and I hope to see you next week. And as Ram Dass says, we are all just walking each other home. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining Paula Kidd Casey on Lawyer of Attraction radio show. For more information about Paula programs and her book, please visit www.lawyerofattraction.com. Until next week, may you experience the magic of manifesting genuine abundance.